All right. Hi, everybody. Long time no see on this podcast. I know the background is familiar to people who know me personally or people who have followed the podcast for a long time. I am back at my parents' house. I'm here for Christmas, but I am here for a little bit longer than Christmas, so I will get into that in just a moment. I'm like weirdly nervous, and I think it's just because I haven't podcasted in a while. I think it's also the added like visual. I personally like watching the visual versions of podcasts. I like having it on while I'm doing stuff in the kitchen or like getting laundry done. There's something about seeing other people and not just listening to their voices that feels a little more engaging and like you're more involved in the conversation. But I promise that this is not a one and done situation. I told myself you cannot put this one up unless you have 3 episodes filmed. So by the time this goes up, which will probably be in like a week, I will have 3 episodes filmed for you and I will not leave you hanging. I feel like I finally hit some stability, like emotionally, mentally, and I'm ready to give my all to the project. Another thing to keep in mind, which I could totally go into the whole, like, what does it take to run a podcast? What does it take to run a YouTube channel? You really need a team. I don't have a team. This is what I can afford, is myself, is my knowledge, my hands, my work. And so sometimes that means that I have seasons where I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to put out 10 episodes. Sometimes I want to put out like 1. And so I am really praying that right now I feel very stable creatively and in all ways and very inspired. So I think we're going to have this podcast back. Prayers up. On today's podcast, I'm going to talk about things that are very personal to my life, but I also want to ensure that other people can relate to the situation. And the title of today's podcast is What Do You Do When the Version of Your Life You Work Towards Doesn't Happen? This episode is really personal to me because this is me telling you that I have moved back to the Midwest. For now. It is a decision I made. It'll probably be 2 weeks by the time this episode goes up. And although I'm having a really fun time, it's good to be back. It's good to see friends. It's good to be with family. But there is an aspect of it where it's like I obviously went out on a limb this year in 2025. I moved across the country. I took a risk. Now I'm back where I started. So what do you do to rectify that situation? And how do you handle, I guess, like the disappointment of it and the balance of peace and knowing that you can always go back and try something again. I think a lot of us move towards things that we view as having a beneficial outcome or something that will validate our talent or our hard work. And that was LA for me. And I felt like, I've been praying about LA for 5 years and it's time to do it. Like it's either time to stop talking about it or it's time to move. And also last fall was the first time that I really felt like the Lord was like giving me the okay. But I should have known from the first week in moving that it was probably not going to be what I anticipated. The first week that I moved to LA, the fire started, my grandpa died, and the Airbnb my dad and I were supposed to stay at for 3 weeks was like not inhabitable. And that was just getting down to Phoenix. Basically, everything since has just been a roller coaster, to say the least. I think it was like 2 weeks ago, I reposted on my Instagram story that 2025 was the most fulfilling but heartbreaking year of my life. And I stand by that post. I don't know who created it, but I think that really is the best way to describe 2025. It's been so life-changing in so many different ways and made me truly like a better person, especially in my character. There were just areas of my character that I didn't even know needed a little growth spurt. And then I went out to LA and I was isolated and I was just me and the Lord. And I was like, oh, she needs a little work. She needs a little help. It was necessary, to say the least. But there's also aspects of it like I didn't get the outcome that I wanted, or even my time there didn't look like what I thought it would look like. And so I want to talk about that a little bit. So I'm going to kind of break this down because I spent a majority of this year comparing Los Angeles and Minnesota. I think if I could give advice to anyone who is moving or relocating, something you can't do is go, oh, this place doesn't have this thing that I can find at home. I had really bad homesickness for the first couple months, and I think because of that homesickness, I was looking for anything familiar, which isn't a bad thing. I wish I would have approached it a little differently, though. I wish I would have said, like, oh, what does LA give me that Minnesota can't? Because I think I spent the first couple months just being like, this isn't like the Midwest, this isn't like Minnesota. And I was constantly comparing people, experiences, restaurants, coffee shops to what I could find in the Midwest, and they're totally different places. I want to talk about some things that LA gave me, some things that were difficult in LA, some things that Minnesota provides for me that LA couldn't provide right now, and things that are really difficult about being back home the last 2 weeks. Los Angeles is a massive city. That's the first thing. I don't think people know how big it is. I had done research upon research, and I don't think I realized how big it was. There are around 4 million people who live in the city of Los Angeles. Unlike Minnesota, where I'm by St. Paul, I could drive an hour and a half south and I'm in Iowa. You can drive an hour and a half, 2 hours south, and you're still in LA. LA has traffic. LA has a lot of square footage. LA has a lot of people, and all the different neighborhoods have such different personalities. I kind of explain LA like a living organism because the people are from all over the world, and each neighborhood has a distinct type of person or personality that really thrives in the different areas. So when I'm talking about LA, I'm coming from the viewpoint of a transplant. I'm coming from the viewpoint of someone who came in with a heart for the city, and I wasn't necessarily looking for job opportunities. I was looking for more people to connect with who were creative like me. So that's the viewpoint I came into the city with. And whatever viewpoint you take with you to wherever you live is going to dictate a little bit of a different outcome, but especially in cities like LA or New York, these bigger metropolis cities, you're going to have really different types of people and you're going to have really different outcomes because people are coming from all over the place. LA gave me a lot of creative people. There were a lot of people there who just understood why I do what I do, what kind of makes my brain run and process. And they also were people who just understood what it was like to be a creative worker. There are creative people in Minnesota for sure. The numbers are definitely smaller because that's not really what attracts people to the Twin Cities. In that, there are a few people who get why I have the passion I have for vlogging, for podcasting, for creating content, for storytelling. But LA allowed me to be surrounded by people who really love storytelling using different mediums, and to just be around people who really understood where I was coming from and what drove me and motivated me. With that, I would also say LA attracts people with ambition and grit. There are people in LA who are doing things and working hours that people in the Midwest would never dream of working. There are people I know who are awake into the wee hours of the morning because they're doing music and they're producing or they're writing, and they also work full-time jobs. Like, they're working full-time jobs to pay their bills, and then on the flip side, they're coming home and they're working all night on the things that they're passionate about. The ambition and grit of the people there is not talked about enough. Also, the people who are Angelenos, the natives to LA, who have stuck it out as prices have risen over the years, and a lot of the, I guess I'll say, feel of LA seems to have changed. That's feedback I get a lot from people there. The environment of Los Angeles has really changed in the last 5 to 10 years. I feel like there is an ambition and a grit from the people who have been there for decades and want to still call it home. Even though there's been a lot of changes, they stick it out. Another aspect of this, I can find single people in Minnesota. Okay, I have friends who are single, but I would say 95% of my friends are married or have kids. And it was so refreshing to be around people who didn't have families. Like, if you go up into the valley or down to Orange County, you're going to have a lot more families and a lot more like multi-generational people living. But in a lot of the, I'm going to call it like the middle part of LA, you have a lot of single people who are pursuing things for work. And I'll just say it was fun. It was fun to have 30-year-olds who were single and marriage wasn't the first thing on their mind. And it wasn't the whole thing that like drew them to the city. Like, none of us came to LA being like, I'm going to find my husband. I definitely did not. I did not come to LA seeing the 35-year-old Peter Pan boys and think this is going to be my man someday. It was nice to take a year off and not feel, I don't know any other word to say, not feel judged for having a different lifestyle than other people, and to not have marriage and kids be your number one priority, and to not have people bat an eye at that. It was really refreshing. An aspect of living in LA that I was very surprised by is how much confidence I had. I am not someone who is a low confidence person. I mean, like, maybe in middle school when I was bullied to the nth degree, but confidence for me does not come short. I'm a very confident, like, well-rounded person, but when you're in a city, at least in my experience, where I had to network constantly and I was constantly meeting new people, there is something to that where you just learn how to show up in a room and you learn how to show up in a space and not take it over. I didn't need to be the center of attention. You learn where you fit in the rooms that you walk into and how to navigate those rooms a little bit better. And that helps you with confidence because then you go into the next room. And for me, being a content creator, it was really nice because I could kind of be like filming and taking in this scenario and kind of slowly transition into the social part of it while still feeling like I was a part of things. I was meeting new people, and it was just a great way to grow like my confidence socially even more than I already had. This also skyrocketed in the area that I'm going to call body positivity. In the Midwest, we are very interesting about people dressing modestly. Not only because of the weather, it gets so cold here that we have to wear layers, but what I'm talking about is some of the swimsuits that I saw in LA I could never see in Minnesota. And when you go into a coffee shop, there are baristas in like tube tops with their stomachs and their shoulders out. And in Minnesota, that just like wouldn't fly. It's a very different scenario here, and people would have like a little bit more of an issue with it than they do in Los Angeles. In Los Angeles, it's very chill. And because I was surrounded by so many people who were confident in themselves, it made it easy to be confident in myself. And because the weather is good all year and you don't have to kind of like get comfy in a swimsuit because you're on the beach pretty often if you want to be, confidence is not something that you have to like step into. It's just something you kind of exude. The final thing that LA gave me was exposure to new ideas, people, places, culture, food, fashion. I would recommend to anybody, if you can at any point in your life, move out of where you grew up in. And it's not in a heart of superiority. It's just like your worldview opens so much more when you are meeting new people from places that you don't have any experience with. When you are going to a place that operates very differently than what you're used to, people speak to you very differently, you interact and make deals very differently for business. It's just so beneficial to your worldview and what you bring to the table and like just your life experience. One of my biggest pet peeves is you do not have to fully agree with somebody else on everything that they believe. I think that's the joy of free will and choice and doing your own research. At the same time, if you can't even conceptualize how someone got there, or you're not even open-hearted to seeing a different viewpoint, that is so closed-minded to me. And it's very frustrating because those types of people will remain complacent. And at least for me, I don't want to be surrounded by people who remain complacent. I want to be surrounded by people who are open to new ideas, who are open to new opportunities, who like to try new things. For me, the worst thing that you could be is like a stagnant, complacent person who is not even willing to see a different viewpoint or hear somebody else's thought process on a subject. Being in a place where I had access to people from all over the world with all different experiences was such a joy to me. The things that were difficult about Los Angeles, hear me out. I think this is across the board. It played out differently with different types of people, but it was something across the board. When I came to Los Angeles, the Angelenos, the natives, they see people rotate in and out of the city all the time. So they are kind of like, I'm not going to invest in this new person because they could be gone in a year. I understand that thinking. It is a little hard when you're a transplant and you're looking for any friendliness and like any feeling of home or like depth in relationships, but I understand how they got where they got. And there are some Angelenos who will be open to you and give you a chance. I think you just have to prove that you like the city and you're not going to just like crap on it the whole time. With that being said, a lot of my experiences with people, both transplants and natives, the way that they go about discussing things and operating is really different. I had to learn pretty quickly that just because somebody says that they want to work together, or somebody says that they are going to come to something, or they'll show up with you to an event, doesn't mean that they'll do it. And oftentimes a lot of the transplants are looking for the best option for their job, for their lifestyle, whatever it may be. I really struggle because I'm the type of person who like my yes is my yes and my no is my no. And I really had to navigate, especially when it came to social media management. I would sit with someone for like an hour and a half and we would talk about like, okay, this is what we're going to do. This is how I'm going to manage your social media. You're going to send me a contract. We're going to start. And then after that hour and a half, I would never hear from them again. In Minnesota, we wouldn't even get to that meal. In Minnesota, we would like find a way in discussion before even getting together to kind of be like, hey, I can't make it. Or like, there's just an aspect of it where people drag you along in the process there and then they just let you off at the end. I would plan something, or I know other people who would plan events, and it would be like an hour before and people would drop off. I think what I don't like about that is it's not that other people owe me their time or other people owe me coming to every event or doing everything with me. I think I don't like how dragged out it is, because then it starts to give you hope that they're going to show up or hope that you're going to work together. And it's kind of a whiplash experience to be thrown off at the end result. So that is one thing that I would say across the board I experienced with both Angelinos and transplants, more so transplants. The other thing that's really interesting about LA is there's kind of this idea of, as chill as it is, you have to be doing something, you have to be involved in something or know somebody. There is an aspect of that. And so I found that even if people were not chasing the industries that maybe transplants would chase, if they were even someone who was a native, they'd be talking a lot about the things that they're going to do or the things they're going to accomplish or what they're going to create. But there wasn't a lot of action. And that was another thing that was a little weird to me, because I'm very much like, I don't talk if I don't have a plan in motion. I will speak on something when I feel it's out of the infancy stage. I noticed a lot of people would talk and talk and talk, and then there wasn't a lot of action behind it. The bigger key factor for me, and the reason that I came back to Minnesota, was financial stress. I knew how expensive it was to live in LA. People are really surprised by this. The cost of living for a single person in downtown Minneapolis versus LA is actually not that different. And there are areas in Los Angeles where I could get cheaper housing than I could in even like downtown St. Paul. It's not that I was surprised by the amount of the cost. For me, it was being unemployed from full-time work for 11 and a half months. And I knew that I did everything I could do. I did 800 plus applications. I did multiple rounds of interviews and would be cut like at the last minute. I knew I was doing everything I could, but the unforeseen financial aspect of that and the loss of my savings was something that really was like the end decision maker for me on coming back to the Midwest. A couple reasons I knew I needed to come home. One, my creativity and just like inspiration was pretty diminished because I was so focused on financial things that the burden of finances, the burden of paying bills, the burden of continuing on and pushing forward when you don't know if you're going to be able to afford the next step of your life, and watching your savings dwindle, it like kind of kills your creative sense. It kind of kills anything in terms of like passion and inspiration, because so much of the weight of your mind is taken up in money and in like provision. And I want to also say, like, this is not LA specific. This is actually really the experience of a lot of creative adults. Is we have a passion and then we have to choose jobs that we hate to pay the bills. The reality of the human experience far before I existed or you existed is that artists and creatives are not very well funded in their lives. A lot of people who are architects and painters and directors don't even get to be where they want to be, even though they have the talent, even though they have the grit, even though they have the hard work, because they don't have the finances. That's something that I just want to say. I know we're kind of having like a tough financial spot all over the board for US right now, but when we do get back to a place where maybe there's a little more accessible income, I would encourage people to support your friends who are doing creative efforts. Instead of going to a big box store and buying an art piece for your wall, like support an artist and invest in their work. Or if you have a friend who really wants to create a project but they just don't have the funding, consider doing like a GoFundMe for them. I just really encourage people, because like creative people have so much to give the world and they just don't have the resources to do it. And it plays out on a bigger scale in a place like LA because there are so many creative people, but I think this is just like true across the board. There's so many individuals, especially women and especially people of color with talent, who aren't funded the way that they need to be. And I can't resolve that for myself, nevertheless, everybody else. So I'm just saying, if you have extra income, consider supporting your creative friends and what their endeavors are, and just watch them flourish, because creative people know how to utilize a dollar. That's all I'm saying. The other way that I knew it was time to come home is that I kept having these cycle of options. So that's what I was talking about earlier, where people would come to me and they'd be like, I really want to do this with you. I really want to do this creative thing. This could be an option. I want to hire you for this thing. And then it was just talk, and there was no final action. There was no final outcome. So I just went through a lot of cycles of options, but no results. And that was something that I just stopped caring about near the end of my time in LA. Like my first 6 months, I'd be like, oh my gosh, this is such an exciting thing. And I feel like especially the last 3 months of living in LA, I was like, that's really fun. And then I would just go home and I'd be like, well, we'll see if I actually get an email, or we'll see if this actually like follows through. I didn't like that cynical nature of myself, but it kind of had to be built out of protection in that way. So on the flip side, now that I've been home for 2 weeks, I've done a lot of reflecting because I just really didn't tell a lot of people I was home. I have a lot of good friends and family who I didn't even really like inform that I was returning. And it wasn't to be gatekeepy, and it wasn't to be mean, and it wasn't to leave people out. I just needed time to like come home, get settled, get unpacked, and like figure out next steps of life. And I just needed time to come back and have some stability. I think that's something I'm really realizing. Having a base with family and loved ones that you can come back to, that you can have some financial breathing room, you can have some familiarity. It's really a blessing. And I'm realizing how many people don't have that. Like either they don't want to go back to their hometown, or they don't get along with their family, or they don't have that option. I didn't have the option of my family paying for everything so I could stay in LA. And you would be surprised how many 30 and 40-year-olds are being fully funded by their parents. And I guess I'll say this, I'm not judging, I'm just amazed. I'm just amazed at that ability, that that's even a possibility for them. But for me, it wasn't. And so coming home and having that financial breathing room here to settle and be comfortable. I've got a part-time job lined up, and I have some other work that's already coming out of the woodwork. So I feel like a lot more peaceful being here. It really is a blessing, and it's not something that everybody has. And I just want to say that I don't think it's unique to me. I think there's a lot of people who have that base that they can come to, but there's a lot of people who don't get that experience. And I also want to acknowledge that I'm very lucky to have that. The slower pace of the suburbs in Minnesota has been kind of alarming, like to the point where I'm sleeping like 10, 12 hours a day because I'm like, there's just nothing to do. I forgot how cold it is. There's just aspects of being back where I'm like, oh, like the slower pace is really nice and it's really relaxing, but I just am not used to it. And I'll tell you this, you will be surprised, even having like a Google map in my car, you will be surprised how much familiarity, not having to look at a map, not having to plan your parking, not having to plan what you're going to wear to see these people because it might be the only time you see them, or because you're meeting someone maybe kind of important. In Minnesota, I know a lot of people. I know the roads here. I know the main highways. I know the streets, and a lot of places I don't need a map for. A lot of places I don't need to worry about where I'm going to park. I don't need to worry about who's going to be in the room because they're people I've known forever. And you would be so surprised how much familiarity alleviates the mental load that you carry when you are in a place that you're still learning even a year later. On the flip side of that, the familiarity can be a little scary because sometimes I'm going into the grocery store here and I'm like, what if I see like 4 people I know? Especially when I hit Burnsville. I was in Burnsville the other day and I was like, I think every ex I've ever had lives in this city. So I was going into the Cub Foods and I was like, I'm scared. Like in LA, I could go into grocery outlet bargain market looking like a rat and nobody knew me. And that lack of being known was kind of nice in that scenario, but in relational aspect, it is nice to be known deeply by people here. I definitely am getting used to being back in a place where I know a ton of people in the city and trying to kind of navigate that and just be comfortable with it again. Something I needed to reacquaint myself with here was advice that my friend Ani gave me. She lived in Dallas for 2 years and then she came back to Minnesota, and she said, I wish I would have sat and written out what I liked about myself in this other place. And I wish I would have reflected on the ways I grew, the things I liked when I didn't have people who had known me forever around me, and what I wanted to bring back into the scenario being back home. It's not that I have like bad narratives or like a bad reputation here, but there are things that I really grew in, especially in my character, in ways I never would have grown in if I stayed in Minnesota. A lot of it was just spending more time with the Lord and not having people to fall back on, but I spent a lot of the year learning about myself, what I'm willing to do for money, what I'm willing to do for work, really truly truly being humbled in a lot of ways. And kind of going back to the creative conversation, everybody says that they won't do something until they're in a situation where they need something. And then you have to kind of consider that stuff. And although I did a lot of things I was proud of in LA, I think there are aspects of myself that really changed there that people in Minnesota don't know about or necessarily acknowledge or see. And so I had to reflect on like, what do I like about myself? What do I like about who I am now that I didn't possess 12 months ago when I left? And I'm really glad that I did that because I think it's really allowed me to come back into this season and do it slowly and do it intentionally and do it how I want to do it and not have to perform or be who I was 12 months ago for the people here. Something I am struggling with in Minnesota a little bit. The fear of stagnation. It's easy to become a little complacent here. It's a slower pace. A lot of people like a simple life here. I'm not hating it. I'm not judging it, but stagnation and complacency can be very easy if you're not careful, and people can really not grow. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, being someone with such a growth mindset, I really struggle to be surrounded by people who maybe don't have the same goals that I do or the same outlook on life that I have. And so that can be a little scary, and it can cause things to be a little stagnant in my creative mind and my dreams about my life. And that's just something I want to be a little careful of because the world is so big, and it's so much bigger than the Twin Cities, and it's actually so much bigger than LA. And I just don't want to limit myself because I'm back in a place that can be a little limiting at times. I'm just going to put it that way. I think wrapping this up, for people who maybe have never moved away, you're not a creative person, you haven't had some big life change this year, I want to wrap up and really touch on some points that I learned, and I think they're really important, and some of them I had within my mind and I just needed to live them out to be able to give them to you as advice. The question that I came to when I was considering coming back home is pivoting a failure or is it wisdom? And I really struggled with that for a minute because I'm like, well, I didn't really want to pivot. Like, I wanted to stay here. I feel like I've adapted and pivoted so much in LA this year. Like, I don't want to pick up everything and move back to the Midwest. And I was really struggling with like the failure concept of it. And as I've thought back and reflected, I found that whatever you're thinking about that doesn't leave your mind is probably something that you need to try. A lot of what holds us back from trying whatever it is the fear of failure. In my definition, failure is never trying something because you're fearful of the bad outcomes. I lived a lot in fear of many things and anxiety of many things a year ago. And now I've tried basically everything that would have terrified me 12 months ago. And I found that you don't always get the outcome that you want, but for me, it would have been more anxiety inducing to stay here and have never tried it than to have tried it and not had the right outcome that I envisioned. So I want to say that if you're thinking about dreaming about something for 2026, this is what I want to do. I've been thinking about it forever, but like, what if I look like an idiot? What if it doesn't turn out how I want? Failure is never trying something because you're fearful of the outcomes. And branching off of that, let's say you try something and it doesn't result the way that you'd like it to result. Not getting what you want does not mean that you wasted time. I just sat here and I talked about all of the character development I had in LA. When I went to LA, I thought I was going to be working with content creators and doing their management of their social media or being mentored by them. And that is not really the experience I had. In fact, most of the people I met weren't content creators, weren't influencers, weren't YouTubers or podcasters. A lot of what I learned was about work ethic, was about character development, was about how to be a creative and have the grit that you need to work in that industry. I would say, although I didn't get the outcome of being able to stay in the city I dreamt about, I don't think that time was wasted. I think the growth that I've had personally is far worth all of the work that I put in to get across the country, to overcome all the different adaptations of week one and onward. If you don't get what you want out of a situation, it doesn't mean that you wasted time. It means that you took something with you and you can learn from it. And I think if we really break it down, character growth and more knowledge will never steer you wrong. The final point I want to make on this, for those of you who are dreamers and you're thinking about 2026, but you're kind of afraid of the risk involved with what you want to pursue, I have an ornament on this tree back here if you're watching the visual, and it is a little mailbox. In my mailbox ornament that came from my grandma's house, every year I write myself a note. So, of course, with such a crazy year, I went back and I read my note from 2024, and something that blew my mind. I'm actually like kind of emotional about this one because I was like, I had no idea when I wrote that it was going to mean anything, right? I just was like, well, we'll see how this year goes. Like, good luck. This is what you always wanted. But at the end of my note, I wrote, risk is necessary for reward, and there's no roadmap here. So keep creating one. Risk is an aspect of everything that we do. Every single decision you make, whether it is staying in your small town with your parents, getting married, having kids, climbing the corporate ladder, if there is a roadmap set out in front of you of traditional life and you want that, even in that, you will have some risks. You will also have some rewards, but in order to get that reward, you have to take a risk. You have to do something that feels scary. You have to do something that puts you out of your comfort zone. And if you don't want to ever experience risk or failure or the potential to have to adapt or pivot, you're going to live a stagnant, complacent, frankly boring life. And no one who has ever done something groundbreaking has done it without being embarrassed, has done it without losing some money, has done it without a little character development, has done it without having to adapt. You can't do anything valuable by deciding to never take a risk. So I'm going to end with this. As I've gotten older and as I have experienced this year the way that it needed to be experienced, I've stopped asking, how can I accomplish this without risk? And I've switched to, how does my knowledge of past risks and outcomes inform this situation? As we get older, I think we should actually become riskier. I think we should actually try to do more new things and fail at more stuff because we have more wisdom from past experience. We kind of make risk this like young person's game. And the reality is the risks I was taking at 20 were so stupid in comparison to the risks I take now because I know myself better. I know what I want out of life more. And I just think that it would be really cool to start practicing this at 30 years old for me and to be like 80 years old and going like, this scares me. I'm going to go do it because I already know from wisdom how to get myself out of it if it goes wrong. You have the knowledge from your past experience of how to handle the things that you want to do for 2026. And I just want to encourage you that pivoting and adapting is not failure. And the only way that you can fail in something is by never taking the next step, by being all talk and no action, by not opening your mind or your experiences to the big world that God has given us, and by staying where you are and being complacent. When you hit the end of 2026 and you do a bunch of risky stuff that felt really stupid and embarrassing in the moment, you're going to be so glad you did it because you're going to end the year reflecting and be like, even though it didn't end how I wanted it to, I'm so glad I did it. I'm so glad at who I became. I'm so glad at what I learned. And it just makes you a more well-rounded person.